That's where my fear came from originally, of her. Because originally it wasn't fear of her, it was a fear of God. I felt that God was speaking through her.
And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place.
Investigators say the premeditated murder actually happened in North Florida, where Anna Elizabeth Young ran a religious boarding school for children.
And suddenly there came a sound from heaven, as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues, like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Ghost, and began to speak in other tongues, as the Spirit gave them utterance.
Anna Elizabeth Young is being held here in Cobb County on a charge of murder for the death of a child back in Florida many years ago. Now investigators wanted to know if there are other victims.
Save yourselves from this untoward generation.
According to the Gainesville, Florida Sun newspaper, investigators believe Young killed a 2 or 3 year old child, and they're searching for other possible victims.
And they that gladly received his word were baptized in the same day. They were added unto them about 3,000 souls. And they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship, and in breaking of bread and in prayers. And fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done by the apostles.
The Cobb County Sheriff's Office describes the woman who lived here, 76-year-old Anna Elizabeth Young, as a former cult leader known as Mother Anna, who ran a religious boarding school in Alachua County, Florida, where she served time after being convicted in 2001 of child abuse for bathing a 12-year-old girl in a steel tub with chemicals, severely burning the child.
And all that believed were together, and had all things common, and sold their possessions and goods, and parted them to all men, as every man had need. And they continued daily with one accord in the temple, and breaking bread from house to house, did eat their meat with gladness and singleness of heart.
It's pretty easy to imagine how, if you and your whole family are on the run from a horrible act that you are all party to, you might resort to some type of religiosity, if only as a means of emotional camouflage. One thing I know for sure, none of us can hide from ourselves. What we do, the lies we tell, it never goes away, no matter who we're able to get one over on or convince. It's always there, inside, threatening to bubble to the surface. Now imagine, hypothetically, not just you and your spouse are culpable, but you have roped your entire family into this ugly thing. Kids so emotionally immature, they would have no way of understanding the long-reaching impact that ugly thing would have on them. Imagine that where you lived, there were whispers about that ugly thing and how what you said was one thing really wasn't that thing. And even though nobody had any proof, everybody knew. Truth has a way of doing that. You know it when you hear it. It has a flavor of authenticity that lies can never achieve, no matter how skilled one might be at manipulation. And don't forget, never forget, that the people you roped into your ugliness, they know. They will always know, no matter how much they lie for you. Every time they look into your eyes, they'll know. Every time you open your mouth, they will understand the lies you are capable of. And so doubt, it takes up residence. Whether they admit it or not, it's there. So what do you do if you are the author of this ugly thing? How do you get away from it? All kinds of criminals suddenly decide that they have found God. And I don't doubt that some do. I don't believe for one single solitary second that Anna and Robert Davidson suddenly found God. I don't believe that there was ever a moment that either of them were genuine about being good Christian people who wanted to help others through their own self-sacrifice. I don't believe this for many reasons. In my opinion, all of it. It was utter bullshit. A smokescreen. Even the new attire that Anna adopted, I'm told as far back as Chicago, before she left. It was just a costume, and later it became a convenient cover. I believe what they got out of their religion was an effective con, and that's something that they both were good at from a young age. They were both cons, and it worked for quite a while, this con. Think about where we are, where they were. Their child went missing and police were starting to wonder if they had something to do with it. They've not only got the Michigan State Police on their backs, even with Kathy's case being stalled, but the Chicago PD is out there now asking questions around where they live about Kathy and possible abuse. And despite the fact that they haven't found anything to pin on them, they sure aren't giving up. You even had some in the local media who seemed to have caught a whiff of the truth as well, based on them bringing their findings directly back to police. But the Davidsons have kids and they need to support them, and maybe they decide that there are worse ideas than getting the hell out of Dodge, or in this case, out of Chicago, out from under the prying eyes of the Chicago PD. Not to mention the scene of the crime. That house on South Hermosa. That closet. So it's 1979 or 80 when their youngest, Joy, is around 2, that they move to Zebulon, Georgia. This is only a couple years after that anonymous letter was sent to police, basically asking why they had given up on the investigation and pointing directly at the parents as people who knew what happened to their daughter, Kathy Davidson. They didn't stay long in Georgia, but it was there that they met a father, son, and daughter who would go on to play pivotal roles in the events to follow. Around 1982 or 1983, they all moved from Georgia to a little house in Waldo, Florida, to start a church called the House of Prayer. They even had services there. All of the members would be given new names, more biblical names, to which they would be referred rather than their given names. The Davidsons would change their names to Anna and Jonah Young. This father, son, and daughter, who would later become among essentially the church hierarchy, at least the father and the son, would be called Elder Adam, Brother Thomas, and Sister Lois. Along with them was Anna's younger brother Grady and her daughter Joy. Most of the kids who were teens at the time Kathy went missing have splintered off and begun living their own lives, although they would filter in and out, visiting the House of Prayer, even after the Davidsons moved from Waldo to a larger farm property in Micanopy, Florida, which would be the final resting place, if you will, of the House of Prayer for all people. 723 Southeast 138th Avenue in Micanopy, Florida, is just a hop, skip, and a sneeze off State Road 93, which runs parallel to I-75. The property itself is just shy of 4 acres that butts up against the highway, but is separated by a wall of trees. The house is tucked away, in fact, and you wouldn't find it easily unless you knew where you were going after you exited the highway and slid around Wakahuta Road for a spell. The road is thickly lined with old trees, among them palm and cypress, reaching high yet bending under the burden of the accumulated Spanish moss that blankets the entire area. The House of Prayer had neighbors across the street, a friendly-looking, white 2-story old house that stands in stark contrast to the dark red house behind the wall, which looks more like a compound than a home. A contractor hired to do some work on the house in the late 1990s after it was sold called it a very strange place. Funky with a lot of add-ons and additions. And looking through the file of photos compiled from law enforcement, someone who flips houses for a living or enjoys home improvement projects might think, wow, I can do some neat stuff with this place. But for me, it's hard to look past the fact that some of those funky add-ons, like secret hiding holes in the floor of a closet and beneath a set of stairs, were specifically built to hide children from protective services who had come looking not too long after the Youngs, formerly the Davidsons, moved in. So, yeah, to call the otherwise neat old house that was transformed into the house of prayer out of the way would be an accurate description, and I am certain that's exactly what the newly minted Anna and Jonah Young wanted. They wanted to be out of the way. Here's where I'd like to take a minute to explain the con that I mentioned, because I refuse to refer to the house of prayer as a church, or anything even remotely resembling a church, because it was founded on lies and deceit. It was never a place that did any good. Now, there were a lot of surface deeds that were done that had the appearance of being good, like feeding homeless and taking in people who needed a place to stay, but in reality, that was all a smokescreen. You don't change your names, and in Robert's case, he legally changed his full name to Jonah Young. You don't do that because God tells you to. I'm fairly certain that God isn't all that interested in what you have on your Social Security card. They weren't trying to adopt biblical names to somehow be closer to God and shed the sins of the world around them. They were trying to conceal their identities. The house of prayer under Anna's reign was essentially a church built upon a strict adherence to the book of Acts from the Bible, taken literally, which included them all living together as a community and pooling their resources. That aspect is pretty integral to the con, and you have the built-in biblical justification for taking the money of everyone who lived there and spending it as you wished under the guise of communal living. And that's exactly what Mother Anna did. In the world, but not of the world. That's how they described themselves. A group that prided itself on community outreach, though this outreach tended toward the target-rich environment of the easily lured single mother or elderly person who already had or could get welfare. They hunted for prey in the economically depressed areas of Gainesville, Florida. And the House of Prayer operated on those taxpayer-funded benefits. Elderly people who couldn't take care of themselves, folks in nursing homes, disabled, anyone who got a check cut to them by the state. The Youngs would minister at local churches and do outreach in locations where they were sure to find people, single women with children in particular, who needed a helping hand. Folks who were down on their luck and needed a place to stay. They would invite them to a service and then eventually to live at the home, get them all settled in, and immediately parents would be separated from their small children. Mother Anna was their mother now, they were told. Their biological parents were no longer allowed to speak to their children or even use their legal names, according to former church members. Babies would stay in Anna's room with her. This church had an interesting way of breaking down familial bonds, rather than nurturing them, and I can't for the life of me imagine what passage from the Bible they used to justify that. The adults would work on the farm, and everyone there would adopt the long, flowing attire that covered almost everything but their faces, and, not coincidentally, any bruises, scrapes, or scars that might be beaten into them. Because all income would be turned over to Anna, except for a small allotment now and again, a few dollars for necessities like toothpaste and deodorant, it wouldn't be long before the members would be completely at the mercy of Mother Anna and Jonah Young. Members were not allowed to leave the house of prayer unattended, except for the few who had jobs, and they too were required to turn over their paychecks to Mother Anna. If any member questioned or challenged her, they were evil. Anna's tools of manipulation were fear, ridicule, and humiliation. Witnesses say that adults were quick to physically discipline children, and Anna would not only beat the children with sticks and other items like extension cords, she would order other church members to do so as well. Anna was described as charismatic and highly intelligent, and now she dubbed herself a prophet, too, so that charisma and intelligence worked to her advantage. What was set up early on is that Anna was a prophetess, and that God was speaking through her. She had the ability to convince people through manipulation coupled with control. According to witnesses, Anna would appear to... Wait, just a second. Let's use the right words because words matter. Anna would not appear to do anything. Anna would pretend to go into a trance, convulse, and speak in a deep male voice. making proclamations to the congregation that they firmly believed to be God speaking through her. After each of these prophecies where she was alleged to be directly communicating with God, the entire congregation had been trained to chant,
Thus saith the Lord.
Thus saith the Lord. During one of these dramatic trances, Anna proclaimed that God revealed to her that if they were going to be physically punishing the children, why not the adults? Now, I fully admit that I am one of those people that does not believe that physical punishment in the form of beatings is helpful when you're raising a child. I don't think that putting fear into a child is the same as respect. In fact, I think that children respect adults more when they can get them to do what they want to do without beating on them. So to me, that makes perfect sense. If you're someone who thinks beating a child is an effective means of problem solving, why not do the same thing with adults, right? Because that's what you're teaching children when you're hitting them right. You're teaching them that if you want someone to do what you want them to do, beat them. But I'm certain that most of the adults in that congregation thought, wait a minute. You're going to beat us and then put us in a closet? You're going to, wait, what? And most adults out there who spank their children, if you said, okay, now, honey, I've decided in my house that when you do something I don't like, and I'm talking to my husband now, I'm just going to spank you. And not the spanking in a, ooh, baby, spank me kind of deal. We're talking about me telling my husband that when he doesn't empty the trash in a timely manner, I'm going to bend his butt over the kitchen table and whack him with an extension cord a few times. That's essentially what Anna was saying. And I'm pretty sure most of those congregants thought, wait, what? God said what? Now you might ask yourself how any grown adult can be deceived by what is so obviously a con. But you needn't stroll too far back in history to get an applicable reference for this sort of thing. Remember Jim Jones and the People's Temple of Jonestown? That's where we get the overused expression drinking the Kool-Aid, as in, boy, you believe what Donald Trump is saying, you've been drinking the Kool-Aid, son. Not exactly a warm reference, given the Kool-Aid in question was poisoned and a lot of people died. It wasn't actually Kool-Aid, by the way. I believe it was some off-brand substitute. So when you couple the fear of physical abuse with religion and the threat of eternal damnation, that seems to be the sweet spot within which people can be made to believe all sorts of things. When asked how Anna was able to exert that kind of control, one member, she said she lived in constant fear of getting the requisite 30 lashes and being placed in the box. Whatever they were thinking, individually or as a group, no one questioned Mother Anna, because if they did, it would invite her wrath in the form of extreme punishment. A punishment of choice for Anna was putting the person to be disciplined in a cage that resembled a large dog crate, which was placed inside the trailer portion of a tractor trailer and parked in the hot Florida sun on the property. Cult members were left for days, stripped naked, without food, water, or any means to use the restroom. One member said she witnessed her own mother locked in the cage for days, stripped naked, and fed through the cage like a dog. Children were put in closets for long periods of time after being beaten to the point that they would eventually have seizures. And if all that doesn't ring a bell or two in the form of modus operandi and the death of Kathy Davidson, you aren't paying close enough attention. By definition, modus operandi, or MO, is a distinct pattern or method of operation that indicates or suggests the work of a single criminal in more than one crime, and boy, do we have that here. Anna, Bobo, McDuffie, Rollins, Moulton, Robinson, Davidson, Young, a.k.a. Mother Anna, had an MO, and that MO involved beating and then putting adults and children into small spaces, often starving them for days at a time, some of whom were left to die in those spaces. Once the children at the house of prayer took so much of her physical abuse that they began to grow weaker and appear obviously ill, oftentimes with signs like seizures, Anna needed to get rid of them. I have to ask myself if anything like that happened to Kathy before she was put in that closet. If she was beaten beforehand. If she was exhibiting any of those symptoms before she was put in that closet. Witnesses said that she had been taken out of the closet and appeared disoriented. That could have been due to the heat. It also could have been due to a head injury. It certainly wouldn't be any different than what Anna did to the children at the house of prayer. So it's not surprising that the people, adults and children, who lived at the house of horrors felt trapped. Couple the threats of religious retribution in the form of going against the word of God with those physical threats of violence, and what you have are people who have been so beaten down that they have a hard time seeing a way out. And don't forget, she had their money too, and most of them had no vehicles. They had no money, no support. If they wanted to leave, it was a situation where it was a dead of night with the clothes on their back kind of thing. And most of them had to come to the house of prayer because they didn't have much to begin with. Their phone calls were monitored. They weren't even allowed off the property alone. Some of them didn't really have anywhere else to go, and certainly not on foot. I didn't read a single witness statement that said anyone actually enjoyed living there. They all said it got awful pretty quick, even if it started out as something they thought would be good. In a very short time, the singleness of heart and community described in the book of Acts literally became a house of horrors. Robert and Anna Davidson were essentially pimps without the sex. They cultivated a stable of people whose money they relied on for their own livelihoods. And just like pimps, they controlled their victims with fear and physical abuse as well. The cult never even had time to be any kind of actual church or spiritual place. They'd barely been moved into the Micanopy house when, in August of 1983, a baby was seen by a doctor after she had what was later diagnosed as a seizure. Baby K, as we will call her, was prescribed phenobarbital, but once that medication ran out, Mother Anna wouldn't get it refilled for her. She would later say that she didn't like how the medication made the child stare. Mother Anna didn't approve of traditional medicine, you see. Most ailments were treated on the Micanopy property with herbal remedies. A few weeks after the discontinuation of the medicine, on November 21st around 8 p.m., the child was brought to Shands Hospital, unresponsive and in cardiac arrest. The records note that CPR was administered at the home before she was transported to the hospital, yet the child had been experiencing symptoms since early that morning, and they didn't bring her to the hospital until nighttime. Baby K was pronounced dead at 7:02 p.m. the next day. 2 days later, the Alachua County Sheriff's Department got a call about a suspicious incident involving the death and burial of a 2-year-old child. A woman reported that her niece, who lived in Gainesville, Florida, with her daughter, became involved in what she described as an occult-type religion, and it was located in the area of Wakahuta Road in South Gainesville. She said her niece's daughter was given to these people to raise, and when the family questioned the whereabouts of the child, they learned that she had died earlier in the week and had already been buried. Obviously, the woman was upset, along with the rest of her family, and rightly so. A family member, a child no less, had been buried under what they felt were suspicious circumstances during a time that child lived with a cult. They had no idea if the death had even been reported to the authorities. Through investigation, it was learned that the child, baby K, had been under the care of a physician at Shands at the time of her death. The medical examiner had even done an autopsy before her body had been turned over to the funeral home. But the family still felt something wasn't right, even when the investigator met with them and explained what he had found. Why wasn't her death reported to the rest of the family? The child's father wasn't even told. Something was off. And apparently something didn't sit right with the investigator either. The original complaint came in right around Thanksgiving, and it was reopened in January the following year. It appears that the investigator spent his holidays with a niggling sense of unease, and despite no specific evidence of wrongdoing, he did what a good law enforcement officer does best. He leaned in for a closer look. He met with the mother of the dead child, and the young woman told him that Anna and Jonah Young took care of her little girl when she was at work, and they were given full rein, including feeding and medications. She said her child began having a medical problem soon after she turned 2 and was taken to a pediatrician at an outpatient clinic. I should note that this coincides with the exact time that the child had been introduced into the home of Anna and Jonah Young. She did not have any medical condition prior to that. Anna Young had taken the child on the last couple of doctor visits, according to the mother, due to scheduling conflicts with her job, and had given the medication to her child up until the time that the prescription ran out, and then she decided to no longer fill it because the child was doing better. Mother Anna said no further medical attention was needed. When the investigator advised the woman of the severity of not giving prescribed medication to a child and told her that it was quite possible the lack of medication had caused her death, the woman became upset. She became even more upset when he told her that he was turning the case over to the state's attorney's office and they might take it before a grand jury for further action. The investigator then contacted the attending physician on duty at Shands Hospital at the time of the child's death. It was his opinion that the death of the child was the direct result of lack of medication. What followed was a charge of manslaughter. Medical records indicated that the child had died of idiopathic seizure disorder, but that didn't tell the full story. A few words on the line marked cause of death never does. You could read the first page or so of the postmortem findings and not think anything of it. That is, until you get to page 2, and it describes the 3 scalp bruises with maximal diameters of 1/2 to 1.5 inches in the mid-occipital area, which is the back of the head. If you reach around right now and feel for that bump in the middle of the back of your head, that's part of the occipital bone. Baby K also had similar bruises on the frontal scalp, all with dark red and purple appearances. There were healed irregular scars on her legs as well, and these aren't little scars either. The front of her left leg has a long 9-inch by 3-inch irregular scar, among others, between the knee and top of the foot. Both tops of the feet seem to be scarred, as well as the back of both legs, low between mid-calf to ankle. The notes in the narrative summary say that baby K was admitted in cardiorespiratory arrest. The mother told the hospital staff that she was experiencing minor irritability and had a fixed stare. She couldn't walk, and then she quit breathing. This followed a similar episode in the previous months, after which she had been treated with the phenobarbital. That fixed stare to which they referred was what Anna had mentioned, and it was likely due to seizure activity. And that seizure activity was due to Anna Young beating the child. When her medication was discontinued after 6 weeks, it happened again.
He still has the scars on him from being whipped. You remember the movie Roots?
Yeah.
How Kunta Kinte had the scars? He looks like that. It's that bad.
I wish I could say that dialogue was from a movie script, but it's not. It's from an FBI agent to a witness in this case. And the scarred person in question, who is scarred to this day, is baby K's brother, who lived with her and their mother at the House of Prayer. Brother James was the moniker he was given by Mother Anna, and he was about 5 years old when his mother, known as Sister Rebecca, became involved with the House of Prayer, a place he would later refer to me as the House of Horrors. Sister Rebecca was initially invited by another member of the House of Prayer to a service at the Micanopy house, and she had been impressed with Mother Anna and her husband Jonah. But she would later compare Anna's reign at the House of Prayer to the Jonestown and Waco cults. According to Sister Rebecca, Anna's strict interpretation of the Book of Acts was bastardized into beatings with rulers, sticks, extension cords, and a heavy dose of fear. She described members being placed in boxes or enclosed spaces for long periods of time without food or water or any means to relieve themselves. This punishment would be meted out not only against adults, but even the toddlers, who were barely old enough to complete compound sentences, never mind understand why they were being locked in closets without food and forced to urinate and defecate on themselves. Sister Rebecca described how men were always separated from the women, except for the members who were married by Anna herself, another thing that she felt it within her power to ordain. Anna married Sister Lois to her own father, Joseph Bobo, an unholy union that created an age gap of decades. Sister Lois was in her early 20s, and Bobo was in his 60s. Anna insisted that God told the young woman that she was to be her father's wife. That may have been less a bond conceived of love than a perk bestowed upon her father, because his daughter ran the place. Children in the cult were not permitted to refer to their own parents as their mother or father, and were kept apart from the parents, only seeing them at weekly church meetings. These were Anna's children now, and she would do with them what she pleased. Once a week, the entire membership would come to the Micanopy property for a meeting. Members would sit in a circle, and Anna would go over announcements to the group. It was at one of these meetings that Sister Rebecca says she learned of her daughter's death. Brother James, Sister Rebecca's other child, and Baby Kay's brother, remembered being told in front of the congregation at another one of these meetings that his sister had a demon in her and Mother Anna was going to beat it out of her. Brother James remembered his sister being beaten and forced to run around and repeat the name of Jesus over and over again. Let me remind you that this is a 2-year-old child. The day Mother Anna told the group that Baby Kay had died, she said she had a seizure which stopped her heart. Sister Rebecca says she was not permitted to attend her daughter's funeral, and she had never visited the burial site. Sister Rebecca said the group learned of the death of another baby named Moses in the same way, at a group church meeting, and you'll learn about Moses a little later in the podcast. But congregants were told he is no longer with us. Then all of his clothes and possessions were burnt in front of the entire congregation, as was the ritual whenever anyone left the church. The same had been done for her own daughter, Baby Kay. All their worldly possessions were burnt in a barrel for everyone to see. Perhaps in biblical terms one might say ashes to ashes, dust to dust. In the true crime world, we would call that destroying evidence. A couple years later, in 1985, Brother James was taken to Shands Hospital for a skin condition that Anna was unable to treat. Both he and his mother were coached beforehand. Brother James was told to say that his old scars were from riding his tricycle through a plate glass window. His mother was told to say nothing, and that's what she did, obeying out of fear of what Anna might do if she didn't. When the doctors examined the boy, they noted numerous scars on his arms, his legs, his buttocks, and part of his left ear had a piece of flesh missing from it. As soon as the doctor saw those scars, he called Child Protective Services. Police reports describe Sister Rebecca as becoming hostile at this point, and that's probably because she could only imagine how Mother Anna would react when they returned to the house of prayer. She'd already had one child die at the hand of Mother Anna, and I assume harbored an enormous amount of guilt over that, and was likely afraid for both her and her son's lives. According to the report, Brother James would not answer any questions without his mother's consent. Brother Thomas told doctors that the scars had been caused by the boy's father when he was 3 or 4 years old. Later, investigators would find photographs of the child at 6, a couple years prior, and they did not show any scars. Records indicated that the boy had been taken previously to Shands at age 5 for a broken leg. Medical records for that time made no mention of the scars either. The boy was put into foster care temporarily, and an emergency custody hearing was called. But the judge denied the request to remove the child on the grounds that they had no proof as to where the scars came from, and both the child and mother were not being cooperative. The judge felt his hands were tied. He had no choice but to return the boy to the mother, and essentially back into the belly of the beast. Imagine how helpless that little boy felt, and it's hard to fathom the stress this little boy was under. That is a lot for a little kid to deal with, particularly given what he had already endured. But law enforcement wasn't giving up. In December of '85, about 2 years after the death of baby Kay, police investigators and child services descended upon the house of prayer, intent on getting the evidence they needed to get the child out of there. The report from that incident notes that the residence was inhabited by several black males and black females who were, quote, of a different type of religion which requires them to dress in long shroud-type clothing, and the children likewise. The group investigating the abuse was met at a large, locked wooden gate that surrounded the property. An unidentified male advised them that neither the boy nor his mother were there, and they were denied entrance. Other cult members came to the gate at that time and became irate, and began cursing at the investigators and telling them to leave. Later that same day, another emergency hearing was held in front of the judge for custody of the boy. Both of his grandmothers and an aunt were now present, and they all expressed their grave concerns. They told the judge that returning that little boy to the religious group was akin to signing his death warrant. The judge was also apprised of the details of the death of baby Kay 2 years prior. Finally, the judge signed the pickup order, and the Sheriff's Department and Child Protective Services went back to the house of prayer. After an extensive search of the residence and barns, neither the mother nor the boy were located. 4 adults and 4 children were present. The children were 3 black males and 1 black female, ranging in age from 7 to 11. All wore the clothing described as shroud type, which covered everything but their faces, and 2 of the 4 children had scars on their faces. A girl named Joy had a large scar under her right eye. A 7-year-old boy named Isaiah had a 2 1/2-inch scar starting from the right corner of his mouth, extending down just under his chin. When he was asked how he got it, he answered hesitantly, "I walked through a plate glass window." That sounds familiar, doesn't it? The investigators noted that the children's statements were obviously pre-programmed and not consistent with what a normal child's reaction would be. The group members then refused them any further contact with the children. Brother James remembers literally hiding beneath the stairs in a hidden room in the main house while law enforcement searched for him. Sister Rebecca also remembers being forced to hide in different hidden rooms and compartments within the house to avoid detection. The investigation continued, despite the fact that the boy and his mother had gone missing. Police learned through investigation that the children lived and went to school at the residence, and some of the parents resided there, while some lived elsewhere even though their children lived at the house of prayer. They were considering reopening the case of baby Kay, and the pickup order remained in place to take Brother James into custody once he could be located. A family member told police that they got a call from Sister Rebecca saying that she had left the state and was currently in Atlanta, Georgia, though they did not know exactly where. She said she wasn't coming back. And the family was sure that she had been transferred by the religious group to another location to avoid prosecution. Almost exactly a year before all of this, another child had gone missing from the house of prayer. So the reaction of Mother Anna to more attention being called to the property makes perfect sense. There was a lot going on and a lot she was covering up, and the last thing she needed was more attention from law enforcement. Sister Priscilla was a member of the cult and had come there with her mother. During the time she was there, she gave birth to baby Luke. When the child was around 2, Anna told Sister Priscilla that her child was, quote, full of the devil and should be put away. Mother Anna had also decided that Sister Priscilla was to be married to Brother Thomas. Mother Anna said that because the father of baby Luke was Hispanic, and both Sister Priscilla and Brother Thomas were not, the child needed to be taken to Puerto Rico, where his father was allegedly from, and left there. Now those of you who are clear on Anna's M.O. understand that the reason she wanted to get rid of baby Luke was that she had been beating on him like she had been beating on all of the other children, and when he was getting ill and exhibiting the same symptoms as the other children, she decided that he needed to go. They couldn't have another situation that so clearly resembled that of baby Kay. That one had been documented by law enforcement and the hospital, so she had to get baby Luke out of there. Sister Priscilla said that Mother Anna dressed baby Luke in a pink dress like a girl and told her, quote, "Take him to Puerto Rico and leave him on the streets." This, by the way, is the same thing that was done with Brother James. After CPS became involved, Anna made him dress in female attire as well whenever they left the property. They were trying to pass him off as a girl in an effort to conceal his identity. In December of 1985, Sister Priscilla says that she traveled from Miami, Florida, to San Juan, Puerto Rico, with the purpose of leaving her child, baby Luke, there. She says that they were accompanied on this trip by Elder Adam, who would become her father-in-law when Anna married her to Brother Thomas. In her written statement, Sister Priscilla said that after they got off the plane, she and Elder Adam took a cab to a bay. They walked to a hotel in a poor neighborhood, and she thought she remembered brick streets but wasn't sure about anything else because she was distraught and filled with grief. She said it was late and getting dark outside. She recalled a fast food restaurant near the church, along with another building next to it. She said that it was late evening and she could hear people singing praises from inside the church. Puerto Rican authorities investigated the allegation thoroughly, thinking that the area in question where the baby was said to be left was called Santurce. However, they were unable to find any corroborating evidence. They asked the Alachua County Sheriff's Office for help, namely in questioning Mother Anna, in case the child never reached Puerto Rico at all, to determine if something else had happened to him in their jurisdiction. To this day, baby Luke has never been found. Now I want to do a recap really quick to keep you up to date on the abuse cases we have covered so far that have been attributed to Anna Davidson Young, because there are a lot and they're hard to keep track. First, 1968, she beat a 5-year-old stepchild, last name Moulton, with a stick, so badly that the little child was hospitalized with bruises, welts, and she was peeing blood. That's one. She had another husband in between there before she married Robert Davidson, Kathy's dad, so who knows how many kids she abused in that period of time. But in 1973, Kathy went missing, and we fairly well established that she didn't actually go missing. And don't worry, I plan to tell you exactly what did happen in later episodes. So that's 2. Then you have baby Kay, that's 3. She beat that child so badly that she started having seizures, and when Anna withheld her medication, she went into cardiac arrest. Next we have baby Luke, number 4, little boy dressed as a girl and left in Puerto Rico, according to his own mother, and witnesses would state that he was also so abused by Anna that he began exhibiting the same symptoms as baby Kay before him. That's 4. We've got Brother James, that's 5, and thank God he didn't die, but he was so brutally tortured, he still bears the scars. And we're not done. There is at least one more abuse victim, whose horrendous abuse led to problems that she would have for the rest of her life until she too died. Her name is Nikki, and her case was the one that landed Anna in jail the first time, and I'll go into that one in the next episode. And there's still baby Moses. His story has also yet to be told. So that's 7. But I want to step back for a minute because you didn't hear everything, and you need to hear it. Brother James' abuse case went cold because he and his mother disappeared. The case was made inactive for about 7 years because of insufficient evidence to identify a perpetrator. Until in September of 1992, when the little boy, not so little anymore, at 15 years old, gave a statement in the presence of his guardian. This is what happened to Brother James at the house of prayer, and I'll read it directly from the report. He was around 7 or 8 years old when the incident in question occurred. He stated that the abuse commenced when Mother Anna Young's daughter, Mary Joy Young, said that he had a piece of candy that he really did not have. His punishment was to receive 33 licks. This disciplinary action took place on the back porch of the residence and lasted for approximately 3 to 4 days, during different intervals when he was whipped. He would be naked when this took place. He was whipped with an electrical cord that also had a plug on the end of it. The reason that the disciplinary action took so long was that they would stop in between the beatings. His punishment for not standing still was that they just would not feed him anything. By not standing still meant that he refused to stand up straight while he was being whipped. Mother Anna was the person who inflicted the majority of the injuries to him. She also had her daughter, Mary Joy, who was 7 or 8 at the time, participate in whipping him with the electrical cord while he was naked. Mother Anna's deceased husband, Jonah, also participated in the beatings. He indicated that his ear was injured during this 3 to 4 day period of time, or a piece of his ear was removed during the beatings. After this, they poured alcohol into the open wounds and then put some kind of salve on them. When the authorities came to the house, they would hide him underneath the house. Access to this area was obtained through something similar to trap doors that were placed in the sanctuary near the steps and also the main stairwell of the residence. During this time period, he was dressed like a girl, and whenever they would go to town, he would have to lay down so no one could see him. They also sent him to Michigan for a period of time. These attempts to hide him were, in his belief, for the purpose of authorities who were looking for him not to be able to see his injuries. He believes that he went to the hospital during the 1985 time span for treatment of impetigo, and at this time he believes he told the authorities at the hospital about his injuries and how they were obtained. I almost can't bear to read it. That poor boy. We know based on the reports that he didn't tell the doctor at the time about how he'd gotten the injuries, and that really just shines a light on how traumatized he had to have been at the time. So scared, afraid in the moment to speak, but left with the impression all these years that he had done or said something to alert the doctors of what was happening to him. And nobody came to help him. Nobody came to save him. Nobody came. Nobody. "33 years after his sister, Baby Kay's death, and after Anna's arrest, the current detective on the case made a plea to the medical examiner in a letter dated March 9, 2017.
Dr. Hamilton, please find attached the entire investigative file for the 1983 death of... What the prosecutors and investigators didn't know then, and we do know now, is that Anna Young was directing an extremist religious cult in Micanopy, wherein poor single black women and their children were recruited into the cult. Once inside the cult, the adults and children were subjected to extreme punishments, including beatings with sticks and extension cords. The children and adults were also subjected to extreme forced fastings, where food and water were withheld for days at a time. Adults were placed inside a locked box, described as the size of a large dog crate, inside the trailer portion of a tractor-trailer during this discipline. Children were also subjected to a form of isolation, being restrained in small locked closets for days at a time, which they were deprived of food and water. Witness testimony has revealed the biological parents of young children in the cult were separated from their mothers soon after entering the cult. All discipline and medical decisions made on behalf of those children were then made by the matriarch of the cult, Anna Young. In the attached case, Anna Young assumed the role of the victim's mother and saw fit to deny the victim access to medicines which could have prevented her death. According to physicians interviewed by Detective Farnell Cole in 1983, her death was preventable. In addition, although the victim's legal name was, the autopsy stated her last name to be Young. The victim's body was released for burial to Anna Young's husband, Robert Young. Witness testimony also revealed the victim was tortured by Anna Young with repeated beatings to her feet and legs. Anna Young was quoted by one witness as saying she intended to beat the demon out of her. I have also provided audio and videotaped statements from some of the various witnesses interviewed recently which support the premise that died as a result of being abused and having her anti-seizure medicines withheld. After reviewing the statements and my investigative summary, I would like for you to consider changing the cause of death in this case to homicide. Respectfully, Detective Kevin Allen, Alachua County Sheriff's Office.
Along with this letter, the detective offered more evidence, including a handwritten note dated January 10, 1984, written by Jonah Young, aka Robert Davidson. He had requested a copy of the medical findings of his daughter, baby Kay. It was signed Robert Young, with a Micanopy P.O. box as the address. He was referring to this little girl as his daughter, despite the fact that she absolutely was not his child. She was a child of one of the cult members, Sister Rebecca. He is listed on her death certificate as informant, beneath the name of the parents, where the space for the father is left blank. I wonder why he was so eager to learn the medical findings in baby Kay's case that he submitted a letter requesting it. Jonah Young is dead, so we can't ask him. There's a lot we can't ask him, like why he didn't intervene when his wife was locking his daughter Kathy in a closet back when he was called Robert Davidson. Questions like, where did you take Kathy's body and dispose of it? And what kind of person watches and participates in all this abuse and doesn't have the balls to speak up and stop it? Those are some of my questions. But we can't ask him. On Saturday, March 5th, 1988, Jonah Young was reported missing by Sister Priscilla. She said he left to go pick up some food 2 days earlier on Thursday and never returned. According to her, he'd been wearing a white shirt and blue pants when he left. Interestingly, not his traditional holy attire. Also interesting, it wasn't his wife Anna who called to report her husband missing 2 days earlier. Someone else had to do that. So, police responded to ye old house of prayer and child abuse and spoke to Anna Young. She said that she had alerted her neighbors and that one of them reported that Jonah's vehicle had been abandoned on his rental property. She said that Jonah and this neighbor had gone to that property on several occasions to remove parts from abandoned vehicles located there. For that reason, his vehicle being there didn't raise any red flags for anyone who may have seen it, although nobody was reported as having been there, including Anna. When she heard the car had been abandoned, interestingly, she didn't go over there and check it out. So officers went to the property and they located Jonah Young's body, a short distance from his parked truck, under a junk vehicle nearby. The medical examiner was called to the scene, but at that time he was not able to determine a cause of death. Here I will read directly from the report. The abandoned Ford truck's left high beam was across the victim's chest and throat. The victim's head was pointing toward the front with his feet to the rear. His head and body were under the transmission. It appeared that the vehicle fell on the victim. A bumper jack was laying on its side at the left front of the truck, along with an abandoned lawnmower. A wheel rim was under the left wheel housing support frame. The rim was lying on its side and at an angle in the dirt. There was a toolbox laying at the driver's door near the victim. It appears the victim was removing some parts from a truck when it slipped from its support, the jack and rim, and fell on the victim. It had rained quite heavily in the preceding week, and the ground was soft. A jack, which would have been unstable to begin with, and the rim, which sank into the soft dirt, causing the truck to shift, and in return, causing a jack to fall out from under the bumper. According to relatives, the victim was going to run some errands on Thursday. He was last seen in the Newberry area that afternoon at the feed store. There was also feed located on the bed of his truck, indicating that he had purchased the feed that afternoon. He never returned home that night. It is theorized that the victim stopped by the junkyard Thursday afternoon after purchasing the seed and, prior to returning home, stopped to remove some parts from a truck, which he had done before. He had probably been there since Thursday afternoon. The cool weather had slowed decomposition. Victim was positively identified by his wife and friends. The victim was reported to have had approximately $1,000 on him, including a Social Security check for $524. He should have had approximately $600 to $700 in cash on him, but none of his personal effects were found on him or in his truck. Victim had changed clothes prior to working on the truck. Since the truck had been sitting unattended for approximately 5 days, and several people had access to the area and no witnesses saw anything, it is impossible to determine if theft had occurred and or who the suspect would be. The ME report listed the cause of death as compressional asphyxiation. There is no evidence, physical or through witnesses, to believe there was foul play involved. This case will be classified as accidental and closed. A handwritten note with the police report indicates that Brother Thomas said the person who found the truck is supposed to be on crack. He was the one who said Jonah Young should have had over $1,000 on him. Notably, the Social Security check he was supposed to have had on him was in the name of Joseph Bobo, Anna's father, who would incidentally be found dead 2 years later on the front lawn of the house in Micanopy, laying face up next to his wheelchair. He apparently died of natural causes, the result of cancer.
Finally, brethren, after a while, the battle will be over. For that day when we shall lay down our burden and study war no more.
As for the death of Jonah Young, it very well may have been an accident. But police certainly aren't ruling out the possibility that something else could have happened. On a chart prepared by law enforcement that lists potential and actual victims of Anna Young that I received with the rest of the police reports, Jonah Young is listed, and there is a note by his name that reads, Anna Young collected survivor benefits for daughter Joy and son Moses. The word motive, with a question mark, is typed next to that. Moses, the other young missing and presumed dead child attributed to Anna, was not her son, by the way, but Anna continued to draw Social Security benefits in his name until the date when he would have reached the age of 18, despite not only not being his parent, but also the fact that he had gone missing over a decade earlier. Now try and tell me that the House of Prayer was ever anything but a con.
The battle will be over. There will be no more. The battle will be over. There will be no more. The battle will be over. There will be no more. The battle will be over.
Joseph Bobo and Jonah Young, aka Robert Davidson, are now together in the Evergreen Cemetery in Alachua County. Joseph Bobo's headstone reads, Blessed Lord Jesus is Lord of Lords and King of Kings. Obey him and live forever. St. John 7:38. He that believeth on me, as the scripture hath said, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water. Elder Joseph Bobo entered his rest after 75 years. And yes, there is an actual spelling mistake on his gravestone. It says, He that believeth on me, instead of in me. On the plot next to his rests a double gravestone. Robert Davidson's side of the tombstone reads, Pastor Jonah Young entered his rest after 42 years. Next to this, on the same double-sized stone, reads, Mother Anna Elizabeth Jonah Young, his helpmate, entered rest after... And then there's a blank spot. Essentially, the gravestone equivalent of to be continued.
It's like you know something, but you don't want to know it. And so I didn't dig. And maybe that's my own selfishness. I didn't want to know because I knew that if I crossed that bridge, it was a point of no return.
The other baby that went missing from the House of Prayer was Moses, and by multiple witness accounts. Once her husband Jonah died, Anna Young had no interest in Moses anymore. Joy described Moses as her adopted brother, and his sudden disappearance had always been a mystery to her, at least on the surface. It does seem like she knew deep down, though, because once those memories began to surface, the floodgates blew wide open.
We were arguing over her undermining me and raising my own children. Before I knew it, I blurted out, how can you tell me how to raise my children when you killed 2 children? And I had always had the thought that she had killed Moses and had something to do with his death, but I wasn't sure of it. I didn't know even positively that he was even dead. I just felt it in my spirit, in my heart. He went on the run, he wasn't there. She said he was with the monks. So I called law enforcement, told them the whole story, originally hoping that maybe they could disprove all my thoughts. Like, I told them everything to clean my guilt, whatever. But at the same time, in the back of my mind, I was hoping they would really find Moses. And I knew they wouldn't, but I was just hoping against hope, I guess.
This little boy was put in a basket and left to die in a closet. What led to his death were repeated abuses that escalated after Anna's husband, Jonah, died. One member of the church said that he would stand outside Anna's door and hear her abusing the boy. But nobody saw much of the child because she kept him in there under a constant state of torture. This church member remembered hearing Moses crying and whimpering from that closet. He said that Anna was partial to beating the children on the bottoms of their feet so that nobody would see their bruises. Another church member, who was given the name Magellan, said that one of her chores was to clean Mother Anna's room, and one day she walked in without knocking, and what she saw horrified her. Mother Anna was holding Moses' head under the water in a small tub. When she allowed the child's head up from under the water, he screamed and cried and gasped for air. Magellan said she witnessed this kind of behavior a few times, until one day Mother Anna announced to the group that Moses was gone and he wouldn't be back. This same member described escaping one day. She said that Mother Anna had left Sister Lois in charge of her, with a specific order to beat her every day while Mother Anna was out of town. The two women were about the same age, and she was able to convince Sister Lois to let her leave. She said Sister Lois even bought her a bus ticket to Chicago. She left and never spoke to anyone about the cult again until she saw the press coverage once Anna was arrested. According to law enforcement, that was a pattern with people who left the cult. They would never speak of it with anyone once they were able to get away, which means there are likely many more victims of abuse out there who have never spoken up about what they saw and heard and endured in that old house in Micanopy, Florida. Secrets and shame. There was no shortage of either at the House of Prayer. Because of all the names being changed at the House of Prayer, and a lot of what happened as far as the adoption and how he came to be there in the first place wasn't done legally, police had quite a time tracing the nexus of the little boy that we'll call Moses, and how he came to be at the House of Prayer for all people. The Chicago PD tracked down and interviewed a witness, a former Chicago police officer no less, and he was able to help. He had a personal affiliation with the case. In the late 1980s, his wife began associating with Anna Young, a woman he described as having formed a religious cult-type church in Chicago at an address that was only a few houses down from where the Davidsons lived when Kathy went missing. He said that that house down the street from where the Davidsons lived had all sorts of religious quotes painted on the exterior siding and the roof of the house. He said that as his wife became more and more immersed in the cult, she started pulling away from her own family. One day he came home from work and found that his house had become occupied by 20 church members, and from that day on they never left. His wife kept trying to get him to join the church, and this put a strain on their marriage. Not long after this, he came home from work one day, and his house was cleaned out. Everything, including his furniture and station wagon, were gone. His wife had taken his son with her, but left their 12-year-old daughter. Months would go by before he found out his wife and son were on a church compound in Micanopy, Florida. His daughter was allowed to visit, but around 1990, his wife returned home, and they began repairing their marriage. It was after she returned that his wife expressed concerns about a little boy that she had taken with her to the House of Prayer to live on the compound with them. The child's name, she said, was Moses. All the man knew about the child was that he was the grandson of a woman that he had known when he lived elsewhere in the area years before. With the little information that police were able to glean from this man and his daughter, they began trying to trace Moses back to his birth family. Eventually, they were able to ascertain the name of Moses' birth mother. They found her incarcerated in Arizona on a 13-year sentence for child abuse from 2009. They would eventually track down Moses' grandmother. She said that her daughter was not responsible and had given birth in April of 1986. Sometime after this birth, a woman, the wife of the officer, asked if she could adopt the baby. This adoption, however, did not occur through legal channels. The grandmother said that the woman was allowed to take the baby, but in a short time disappeared from town altogether, and she had heard that she had left her husband after cleaning out their bank accounts and taking all his furniture. Remember, this is an alleged group of churchgoers who are robbing a family member of his belongings, money, and vehicle. Another suggestion that this wasn't really a church, so much as a grift. Anna Young really had no use for little Moses while he was alive, except as her personal whipping post. But she was certainly happy to receive Social Security benefits in his name. She drew his benefits until the date that he would have reached the age of 18, long after he was gone, long after she knew he was dead, long after she killed him. Within 20 days of her husband Jonah dying, Anna applied for Moses' birth certificate even though she wasn't legally his parent, so that she could apply for survivor benefits. According to cult members, Anna instructed a fire to be lit to dispose of the little boy's corpse. Moses' body was put in a burn barrel and destroyed, along with all of his belongings. In 1992, when Sister Lois escaped the cult, she began cooperating with police, despite the fact that her brother, Brother Thomas, and her father, Elder Adam, were still there. Sister Lois told the story of Moses to police, and they sent an investigator to question Mother Anna about him. At that time, Anna Young looked directly at investigators and said that she didn't know any child named Moses and had no knowledge of anyone with that name ever being there. It was shortly after that that Mother Anna went on the run.
Words can't explain how I feel about her. I wish I could put her in a basement, and every time I think about her abusing kids, I would go down there and just abuse her in some type of way. She may look like a good person, or she may talk as if she's a God-fearing person, but don't let that fool you.
When Anna Elizabeth Young's mugshot popped up on the TV screen after she was arrested last week, Jerry Hill couldn't believe it.
I kind of got weak at the knees. My heart started beating real fast.
Last time Jerry and her family saw this face, Young was headed to prison for the pain and agony she caused Jerry's sister, Nikki.
She was a very outgoing person. She was a sweet person.
She died 2 years ago from diabetes. For 25 years, she suffered from scars after Young burned her in a chemical bath.
They were just speechless when they saw my sister laying there and had been burnt the way that she was.
Jerry says Young had tried to hide it, telling her parents they couldn't visit their daughter in boarding school.
My understanding it happened a week prior, so Anna tried to treat it herself and give her home treatments and try and heal the process. But I guess when it didn't heal and it wasn't getting any better, then that's when she just had to let my mom know what happened. Because of her burns being so severe, she had to learn how to walk again.
The parents of this victim, and her name is Nikki, told police that their daughter stayed at the House of Prayer from January of 91 to February of 92. Initially, they say they met staff at the House of Prayer at a revival meeting. They said that their daughter wasn't attending school regularly and she was getting bad grades, and that appears to be the reason that they left her at the House of Prayer in the first place. They had no suspicions of abuse, and they thought she was doing well. Around January 12th of 1992, the parents say they received a call from Elder Adam, who told them their daughter had had an accident and received some burns. Prior to this, no one at the church had called the parents, they said, about any other incidents, and they visited her regularly, about once a month. When they arrived at the house of prayer after they got the call from Elder Adam, they found their daughter upstairs in a bedroom, with her legs wrapped in torn bed sheets that had been soaked in herbal products. They were told that Mother Anna Young had given their daughter Nikki a bath, and she would be okay in about 2 weeks. Anna told them that she had consulted with a doctor who had prescribed Scott's herbal products. So the parents were under the impression that the doctor had seen the child. But finally, Anna told them that no, she had not called the doctor to look at Nikki and her burns, because if she did, the doctor would call police. Now this alone tells us that Anna knew full well what she had done was criminal, and by not allowing the doctor to see the child, she was making a concerted effort to avoid criminal charges due to her actions. Nikki's parents told police that once they arrived, Anna Young would not even allow them to spend the whole day with their child. Eventually they would be forced to leave, but they would go back and forth from the house of prayer to their home in South Carolina, and when they left they would leave Nikki's grandmother with her. She would beg to go home with them every time they left, but they said they couldn't take her home at that time because they felt that she was too ill to be transported, which is why they left her there in her grandmother's care until she could heal enough to be transported. She was unable to feed herself. Sometimes she was tied to the bedposts so she wouldn't scratch her injuries. She told her parents that there were some days that she was tied to the bedposts all day. When church members were questioned, they said that they felt Nikki had to be tied down whenever they had to leave the house to take one of the elder members to the doctor. When her mother asked how she was able to go to the bathroom, Nikki said that she used a bedpan. Elder Adam told the parents not to make Anna upset, and when their daughter was well enough just to get her out of that house. Sometime around mid-March, Nikki was taken home to South Carolina. At the point that she left the house of prayer, Nikki was so bad she could not walk and she was using crutches. When she arrived, her feet started bleeding, and then she was taken to a doctor. Mother Anna had tried to intimidate her parents from calling the authorities, warning them that if they did, they would be arrested for neglect. Once she got safely back home, she opened up to her parents and told them about being hit with a stick as punishment while at the house of prayer. It was then that Nikki's parents finally relented, and they called law enforcement. When the investigator asked her parents why they hadn't taken Nikki directly to a medical facility when they arrived home, her mother said that the injuries appeared to be healing at first, but it does sound like Anna got to them and they were scared to seek medical attention. The police came to take her statement, and Nikki told them all, finally, what she had endured. It was a day like any other day. The plan was to take one of the elder members of the church to the doctor. As they all gathered to leave, Mother Anna sniffed and looked at Nikki. I can imagine her scowling face as she shook her head, telling Nikki that she would not be joining them on the outing because she smelled bad. Poor hygiene displeases God, Mother Anna said, and Nikki would be punished for that. The girl was locked in Brother Thomas's cabin on the property while they were gone, which was essentially a shed-like outbuilding. When the group returned, Nikki was taken into the bathroom in the main house. 5 buckets of hot water had been prepared to place in an oblong metal tub. Nikki watched Mother Anna dump about half a box of Ultra Tide into the water, which Anna had described to police as simply a handful. Police would later deduce that the blue and white powder described by Nikki was actually Ultra Tide with bleach. Nikki slowly removed her clothing and tentatively put one foot in and then quickly jumped out. "It's too hot," she told them. "If Sister Priscilla and I can stand it, you can too," Mother Anna said. "And if you don't, I'm getting Brother Timothy." Horrified at the idea of her bringing in a man while she was undressed, Nikki got back in, but again jumped back out, begging them to put in more cold water. She couldn't bear the stinging heat. This repeated several more times, with Mother Anna demanding that she get in the tub, and Nikki trying, but unable to withstand the temperature. Eventually, Brother Timothy was summoned by Anna to hold the girl down in the scalding water. Nikki described grabbing for some type of clothing to cover her chest. "Let go of me!" Nikki screamed at Brother Timothy. Nikki wasn't sure who, but someone grabbed a stick and smacked her hand with it. It took both Sister Priscilla and Brother Timothy to hold Nikki below the scalding water as Mother Anna scrubbed her body. "Look at her foot," Sister Priscilla said, getting Anna's attention. The skin was peeling off. They pulled Nikki out of the water and showered her off with cold water. Bumps were rising all over her legs. Nikki got dizzy and she fell. Her private area was burning and it hurt really badly. To that, Mother Anna said, "Maybe it'll burn some of the evil out of you." Nikki tried to eat an orange and then get some sleep, but she remembers being awakened in the night and moved from the bed to the floor because her blisters were bursting and soiling the bed that she had been sharing with another church member. God forbid someone else should be discomforted by the bodily discharges of a girl who had just been tortured. The next day, creams were mixed and applied to Nikki's legs and thighs. It was at this point that Mother Anna had to remove Nikki's toenails. She was moved to the couch after that. It was around this time that her parents were called, but Mother Anna told them not to come. "Is something wrong?" they had asked. Mother Anna's response, "Satan is always busy." God, you know what? That pisses me off. When people use God or Satan or any other thing as an excuse for their own actions. Because if there was anything in this scenario that resembled a devil, it was the woman scrubbing a child who was being held in a cauldron of steaming, hot bleach water. That sure sounds a lot like something the devil himself would do. When they arrived, Mother Anna apologized to Nikki's parents. "I didn't know that would happen," was all she could muster as an excuse for torturing the girl. She promised to take care of Nikki's injuries. They wanted their daughter to see a doctor, but Mother Anna told them if a doctor came out to the house, they would have to make a child abuse report, and she would be taken from her parents. Anna suggested that they all pray about it. So for the next 6 weeks, the parents or Nikki's grandmother stayed with her, and by March they felt she was able to be moved. Once she got home, they took her to a clinic, and then she was transferred from there to a burn center. When the investigator asked Nikki about other forms of punishment that she had received at the house of prayer, she told him she'd been whipped with a stick for things like a messy book bag or dirty clothes. Nikki said that she never told her parents what was happening because she was so afraid of what Mother Anna would do after they left. She went on to tell them that she had been locked in the shed outside on more than one occasion, and so had the woman who Mother Anna had taken to the doctor that day, the elderly woman. Nikki said that Mother Anna told everyone that Sister Priscilla was possessed by the devil, and Nikki once witnessed her being beaten and thrown against the wall. When the investigator went back to question Mother Anna, she admitted to putting Ultra Tide and Pick and Save bubble bath into the water, but she denied putting anything else. She said the girl had a hygiene problem and she had simply bathed her. She admitted to doing it to shame Nikki into being better with hygiene practices. "That girl has one of those all-day attitudes," she told police. When they asked her to explain what that meant, she said it was someone who liked to take their own good time. What she essentially meant was that she had a hard time controlling the girl, and we all know how much Anna needed to be in control. Anna admitted to tying Nikki to the bed so she wouldn't scratch at her sores, but she said they only did it when no one else was available to watch her, despite the fact that Nikki told them that sometimes she was left like that for days. Anna said she had even given Nikki range of motion exercises to do, and that she'd been walking when she left the house of prayer, which we all know was not true because she had crutches to get out of that house. And what comes to my mind as I think of Anna giving the girl range of motion exercises, this girl that has severe burns on her legs, is Anna forcing the girl to move her painful, burned limbs so that she can enjoy and watch the girl suffer. I get the distinct impression, based on how many people that she abused, that Anna got some sort of pleasure from causing pain in others. Then the investigator questioned Anna as to why she wouldn't let Nikki's parents into the room with her except for limited amounts of time when they were there. And she said that they babied her, and she needed to learn to do things for herself. And then Anna started to cry and told the investigator she would never purposely hurt a child. Investigators then questioned others in the house, but for the most part, they gave very little information, or they backed up what Mother Anna said. They all appeared reluctant to talk. The investigator was unable to speak with two of Mother Anna's daughters at the time who would have been there and probably witnessed much of what had occurred in the house, because they had been sent back to Chicago. A few months later, as the investigation continued, Children's Services returned to the House of Prayer with Detective Mike Lentz and Officer Stuart Parrish. They wanted to nail Anna down on her version of events. During this questioning, the investigator asked her if she had ever made the statement, "Maybe it will burn some of the evil out of you." Mother Anna said that she had not. "What about Satan is always busy?" To this, Mother Anna replied that she indeed may have said that, because it's a part of their teaching. A familiar saying, in fact. Mother Anna always referred to this incident of torture on a spiritual level. There's a handwritten note in the police report that was sent home with Nikki when she left. It reads as follows: "Blessed Lord Jesus is the Lord God that healeth thee. Believe and obey. Schedule for medicinal and therapeutic exercises and supplies, methods and procedures." The following list begins with the title Ingredients: Prayer and Faith. Cloth or gauze, peroxide, hazel astringents, aloe vera gel, golden seal, vitamin E or pure cocoa butter, echinacea, golden seal combination. Clean feet and legs daily, morning or night, with peroxide diluted half with water. Pat dry with a soft cloth and apply swelling lotion, known as hazel astringent. Rub in softly. Wait a few minutes. Praise the great I Am. Then apply the Vera gel with a small amount of golden seal mixed in. Spread liberally over burn area. Sprinkle golden seal all over and wrap with a wet cloth or gauze in hazel astringent. Wet well and then wrap. After first wrapping, repeat again with dry wrap until the area is covered with dry cloth. Repeat the same procedure with the second leg. Oil the rest of the healed burned area with vitamin E or pure cocoa butter. Give tonic in the morning and evening of 1 teaspoon golden seal stirred in 1 cup of hot water. Take twice daily with 1 capsule of vitamin E and 1 capsule of echinacea golden seal combination. Great is our Lord. Exercise legs by walks, lifts, and kickouts every 2 hours until patient feels she has done enough. Stimulation is necessary to decrease any susceptibility of infection or diseases, stiffness or soreness. Praise blessed Lord Jesus, from whom all healing flow. And it's signed Mother Anna Elizabeth Jonah Young. Anna Young was charged with aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony in the state of Florida. A warrant for her arrest was issued, but she absconded from the state. Florida was prepared to extradite her if they could find her, and local law enforcement entities in Georgia, Louisiana, North Carolina, and Illinois were asked to assist because numbers in those states came up during telephone log searches. But at that point, Mother Anna was on the lam. Now, one aspect of life at the House of Prayer that I have not covered much is the extent to which the living environment itself was weird and creepy and unhealthy, and that is setting aside all of the abuse for just a moment. There is something very strange about Anna marrying off her father to a young girl barely out of her teens when the man was in his 60s. Anna also ordered the mother of baby Luke to marry Brother Thomas, but her motive here was purely self-serving. Anna had been repeatedly beating this child to the point that he was now gravely ill, and her way to get rid of that child before he died, and they ended up with another baby K situation on their hands where the authorities were alerted, was to order Elder Adam and the baby's mother to take him to Puerto Rico and abandon him. Her justification for this was that the child was half Puerto Rican, and he would not look like he belonged to the couple. It's not quite clear to me why she sent Elder Adam instead of his son, Brother Thomas, to do the dirty deed, particularly if the latter was the one who would be marrying the mother of this child, but it might be due to the fact that Anna used Brother Thomas as one of her enforcers around the house of prayer. He's noted as being someone who would do some of the beating of the other cult members for Anna. Another weird, creepy aspect is how she separated the males from the females, not allowing them to interact. Anna was the arbiter of relations among the adults in the group, and nothing illustrates the extent to which this dysfunction had metastasized like cancer, better than Anna ordering a member to castrate himself. Yes, you heard that right. I said castrate himself. According to multiple members of the House of Prayer, this member had sexual relations with another member, and when Anna got wind of it, she ordered him castrated. To justify this order, she quoted the Bible. If your hand offends God, then cut it off. If your eye does, pluck it out. Well, if Anna truly believed in that Bible verse, she would have no eyes or hands at this point. But even more telling as to the depths of this depravity and control is the fact that he actually did it. Now ask yourself if you know even one man who would cut off his own penis under any circumstances shy of being hopped up on bath salts, and that will give you the answer to how brainwashed these poor people were. Not only did he do it right there at the house of prayer, his wife at the time, a nurse, assisted. Then this man was sent to one of those small shack cabins on the property to recuperate. I should note that these things that we're calling cabins were essentially storage sheds, not some kind of comfortable resting area. They were bare bones, no AC or running water, just a bed. Eventually, this man's condition deteriorated so much so that he was forced to seek treatment from a medical professional. He did this out of town to avoid word getting out about the injury and further raising red flags that pointed to suspicious activity at the house of prayer. I want you to think about it. Think about that house and what was going on. Did Anna, and frankly Jonah too, he's just as culpable, take some kind of pleasure in knowing that on any given day, there were members of this flock hidden away in cabins and rooms and cages and dark, dusty closets in that horrible, horrible place, who were hungry, beaten, mentally exhausted, bleeding, burned, scarred, battered, suffering? Did Anna pause just outside their closed bedroom doors and listen to the muffled sounds of their agony? Did she like it? Is there something in her that feeds off the pain of others? And part of her MO was pulling other people into her deranged actions, manipulating members of the group into beating one another, children beating other children, during punishments that occurred while an entire group looked on. Incidents like having church members strip two females naked and place them in the dog cage together for an entire weekend, and then have these same church members go back and hose them off when they came out, pulling other members into the depravity so they were complicit, which would eventually play on their guilt when they wanted to leave. It was something she could hold over them. And what about her husband, Jonah? Formerly Robert Davidson. She had killed his own flesh and blood. He helped cover it up, and then he stood back and watched as the same behavior and abuse and results repeated over and over and over again. And Robert Davidson, aka Jonah Young, did nothing to stop it. Not only that, but he participated. And what about the mothers whose children were abused while at this cult, who did nothing when their children were abused? They were there, but they'd been so manipulated, so taught that Mother Anna's word was God's word, that they lived every day in fear of doing anything that might upset her. Anna was described as being completely unpredictable and moody. She could be kind and loving one moment and incredibly cruel the next, for no apparent reason. Did she have some sort of undiagnosed personality disorder? Which, by the way, would certainly not excuse or even explain the abuse she meted out, because she knew exactly what she was doing. She chose her victims selectively. She knowingly changed not only her name, but everyone else in the church. She didn't treat her own natural children like the children she abused and killed. To this day, they all allege that they never even saw any abuse. And that's damn near impossible, at least where Kathy's concerned. Also, they're all alive. Sadly, that cannot be said for all of the children from the House of Prayer or her stepchildren. And let's not forget that Anna benefited financially from every one of her victims, spending their money how she saw fit. She sent Brother James away to live with her own relatives to keep the authorities from being able to prosecute his abuse case against her. Can you imagine how scared that kid must have been? This woman killed his sister, and then she sent him to live with her relatives. I mean, he had to be worried that she would come after him and kill him too, right? Everything she did was with malice aforethought, which is defined by a premeditation, a conscious intent to cause harm that includes an evil and depraved state of mind and a glaring lack of concern for the well-being of others. This is the mindset of the person who had evaded capture while police continued to collect more evidence and statements. In January of 1993, the FBI showed up at the home of Anna's daughter in Georgia when they were made aware that she had been harboring Anna for some length of time. She told them that Anna came to live with her in October of '92 at her request to help her with her terminally ill father, who was Anna's first husband. Her daughter Joy was 14 years old at this time and had also been staying with her. Anna's ex-husband died in December of 1992. The daughter that had been harboring this fugitive alleged that Anna had left Georgia a month later in January and was headed back to Micanopy as far as she knew. She left driving an old station wagon with Florida tags. Now that's highly doubtful, the fact that she was going back to Micanopy, because this was after she had been charged. There was a warrant out for her arrest. It's more likely that her daughter had been harboring her there knowingly, and she most certainly was not headed back to Micanopy and right into the hands of law enforcement. No, Anna Young was on the run, and years went by as police continued to track her down to no avail. She moved around a lot. She stayed underground with like-minded people who would keep her without question. In August of '98, the FBI contacted the Office of Inspector General with the Social Security Administration in Jacksonville, Florida. They were contacted to see if arrangements could be made to hold Anna Young's Social Security check so that she'd have to appear at an office to pick it up. At that time, they could not make those arrangements and said that they did not comply with subpoenas or court orders requesting information on recipients of Social Security benefits. The only information they would give the FBI is Anna's history of name changes with the agency. In 1957, her name was changed from her maiden name, Bobo, to Elizabeth Anna McDuffie, her first marriage. 7 years later, in 1964, she changed it to Anna Rollins, her second marriage. There was no record of it being changed for the third and fourth husbands, but in 1981 she requested it be changed to Anna Elizabeth Davidson. A year later, in 1982, she requested it be changed back to her maiden name, Anna Elizabeth Bobo. A year after that, in 1983, she asked that it be changed to Anna Elizabeth Young, right around the time they arrived at the House of Prayer in Micanopy. In November of 2000, the National Enquirer ran a spotlight article on the FBI's most wanted women fugitives, and a reader recognized Anna Davidson as someone she knew through an acquaintance. She directed them to where the woman was living, reportedly with a brother and a niece in Alton, Illinois. So, again, more family members harboring the known fugitive. The story noted that the Alton Police Department descended on the house at 11 p.m. on November 21, 2000, and they searched the single-story home. At first, they were unable to find Anna, but they soon noticed a stairwell leading up to an attic. As they shouted that they were coming up, she called down that she was in the attic, and she eventually came down without a struggle. On May 31, 2001, Anna Young pled nolo contendere to one count of culpable negligence, child abuse, and was found guilty. For the crime against Nikki, Anna was sentenced to 6 months and 12 days in jail. And then she was out, and it would be well over a decade before police had enough evidence to arrest her again.
She ran that boarding school for years Do we know how many victims could be out there?
You know, there's no telling at this point, but officials say they have cold cases connected to her. A trail of torturing children and a murder over the course of nearly 50 years. Jerry is hoping more victims who attended the Florida boarding school called House of Prayer will come forward, so this time when the case goes to court, Young can be in prison for good.
Stay tuned.